United States citizen. Find that out. That's my information now. This is an amazing resource because I'm going to emphasize to you all, I am not an immigration attorney, not an immigration attorney. I have established a rapport and relationship with a couple immigration attorneys in my community who are excellent, who service their community or their clients the way I do. They care about their clients. They aren't out to gouge them. They do charge a fair fee, but they want to help people. And you find in your community someone like that, because if you don't, just because I'm giving this presentation does not mean that I don't call an immigration attorney up and say, hey, I've got these facts, he's charged with this, this is when he entered the country. Some people are actually in the middle of getting their citizenship, and they get in trouble, and then guess what? All that hard work, they're just about ready to become a citizen, then it blows up. And you want to be extraordinarily careful about what you do for that client. And in terms of finding an immigration attorney that you can trust, that you feel they give really good advice, they'll take the time. If it costs you a few $100s, it encourages that relationship. Like, I'm willing to spend $400 to establish a relationship with somebody who can help me with numerous clients, because when you give someone money, they suddenly kind of like talking to you more than if you don't. Okay, so this is a great resource, though. These people are out of Oakland. They do talk a lot about California law, but amazing, because, you know, immigration law is federal. Amazing resource. Check them out. So, all right, here's you. Don't worry, the next slide is about us girls. Here's you guys. When you go into court, this is you. Now, I know I'm stealing the thunder of an earlier speaker who said that we're all warriors, but truthfully, I don't know if you know about this movie. It's about 300 Spartans that faced 1 million invading Persians. 1 million. And they held them off at the pass to protect their village. Okay, it was a great movie. I loved it. Because the king consulted with his wife, the queen, and treated her like me. But in addition to that, they were badass, and they kept those invading Persians at the pass, and they protected their village. I consider every one of my clients part of my village, and I'm there to protect them. And if it means that I have to be nice to people that are scumbags and liars and people who hide the ball, like these entitled prosecutors who are supposed to have a higher ethic, a higher calling to the interests of justice, which they don't usually hear the message, but whatever. If I have to be nice to people that I'm not fond of, fine. But by the way, nice doesn't usually get me there, but I'm just saying, you know, we all have to alter little things. One thing I want to say is, even if you're a warrior, it never serves you well to be angry or to get animated to the point where you look angry or to get too emotional. That's hard on all of us. That's why you have to have good family and friends. And I know as the NORML crowd, they have other ways to moderate the stress of holding it inside. Because when you go into court, you have to know you're there for your client. And I know you get pissed off because they're not going to give you what you want for your client. And so what you've got to do is find a way to get what you want. And here we are, girls. Okay? We're warriors too. Okay, now, imagine, just like the slide says, you are traveling down this portal to a place of extreme heat where danger lurks. WTF. Well, guess what that is? How does that relate to immigration consequences? Let me show you the way. Padilla versus Kentucky. Now, when that case first came down, nobody was really talking about it because it takes a while. Like, all right, what's the least sexy thing that we talk about when we're not at the office or when we're not fighting a case? Is it immigration consequences? No. It's usually about, oh my God, did you just see that new U.S. Supreme Court ruling that came down that took the last good tooth out of the Fourth Amendment? All right. Well, guess what? We already know that there's a lot of toothless rights, and we find a way to make those teeth work. But this Padilla versus Kentucky is a very important case because what it says is, well, it says things on my slide here, but it is ineffective assistance of counsel if you do not correctly advise your client about the immigration consequences that are relevant to the plea offer that you are negotiating for them. So gone are the days where, well, it doesn't matter, we're not going to trial, or gone are the days where I got him a really good deal. Because guess what, folks, even some misdemeanors, I know this isn't a drug conviction, even some misdemeanors where they serve 365 days in county jail elevates that misdemeanor to an aggravated felony, which we'll get to in a minute, but an aggravated felony is mandatory deportation without a hearing. You've got to know, now that the Supremes, oh, they said you can sleep during death penalty and it's not an IAC. These guys are, yeah. But if you misadvise or fail to advise, it can be by omission too, folks. It isn't just affirmative. Okay, if you fail to advise exactly what they're going to face for their circumstances, not just generally immigration, blah, 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 IAC. Now, they have a year from when they know about that to go after you. And I don't know about you, but I do not carry errors and omissions insurance. But I also am smart enough not to have a lot of assets that they can attach. No, not smart enough, maybe not rich enough. But anyway, the point is you could be sued civilly. In addition to that, you could also, in California, we have to report ourselves to the bar. We have to call them up and go, oh, I just committed IAC. Now, I've not heard of anyone being put in state bar proceedings, but in California, they like to maybe publish in an article that, I don't know, that embarrass you. It's called a certain thing. I don't really track that very much because I don't intend on them being in the radar, but whatever. You've got to be careful with this IAC stuff for a lot of reasons because you care about your client as number one. So here it just says, same thing, applies to omission and misadvise. By the way, Padilla is right up our alley. It's about a guy who had a grip of marijuana in his truck, got pulled over by CPH or CHP or not, well, I don't know if it was California Highway Patrol. Actually, it was in the South. It was some highway patrol that pulled him over. He got a deal and immediately found out he was going to be mandatorily deported. Okay. Now, I don't know about your jurisdiction, but in Los Angeles, I'm just saying you need to, one of the first things you also need to think about, not only about having that immigration friend give you the advice particular to your client's circumstances, but you've got to check out your prosecutor's office. They might have a collateral consequence policy. They might. By the way, they're not going to tell you about it because usually the guys in the trenches, they don't care about that because it might clip their wing a bit about being entitled and trying to shove a deal down your throat, telling you you've got to take it. Our LA DA's office, they have a collateral consequence policy that is published on their website. And it talks about, they'll look at that individual and they'll weigh and measure to determine whether or not they want to give them something special to avoid the collateral additional penalty consequence that other equally situated clients or defendants don't face. It's based on equal protection. I mean, this is what I'm thinking. I mean, even though it's rare that we ever would think they would consider that. That's why they have this policy. I think it's really pretty much PR, though. It makes them look good. Because you go to court, you better invoke the policy. I print it out and give it to this is your policy, okay? If it helps me. You know, sometimes you don't want to necessarily tell them, by the way, this is how vicious some prosecutors are. I don't always tell them, hey, I got an immigration consequence I'm trying to avoid. No, because then they're going to say, all right, fuck her and her client. I'm going to make her, I'm going to make her take this deal. I'm not going to be flexible. Of course, I go up the chain of command. I mean, really, I will. I know it's not popular, but if somebody's got their heels in the mud and they are going to telegraph to me that they're trying to personalize this in some way against my client or just to be a power trip or whatever, I'll go up the chain because they have this collateral consequence policy, and I'm going to hold them to it. But I don't always telegraph it because if I can get the deal I need to avoid the immigration consequence, why would I let them know? Why would I give them anything, any weakness in our situation? Because some people are emotionally mature, they're mean-spirited, they became prosecutors because they don't have a good personality, they're government employees, pals, and by the way, let's make them earn their money. I overwork, I make sure I litigate the shit out of things when I have to. You know, if I can get a deal that's perfect, who needs to litigate? I make them work for that government paycheck. and you should too. All right, here's one picture of the DAs that we have, some of them. They believe in gilded cows or whatever these are, rams, and they think they're just, great. There they are, and we are going to take them down. Okay. I already said this, always inquire if a client is a citizen or not, and find out all about them, like when did you enter into the country? I've had clients that were brought here when they were 3. They speak better English than I do. They have no cultural cues, and they don't think that they need to become a citizen because they feel like they are. That's scary, because when they suddenly realize they could be deported to a country where they do not speak the language, they have no family, they could never work, and some of these countries, I hate to tell you, they have gangs that you either join up with the gang as soon as you hit the dirt, because when you go, if you're a deported felon from the United States, at the airport, they sometimes put you over here, take pictures of, if you have tattoos, take pictures of you. They then release that information to paramilitary groups that then hunt you down, so that you're not hunted down by them. You have to click in with the local street gangs, and you can't even speak the language. Bad. Very bad. Also, learn of some compelling facts relevant to their presence. Like if they were brought here when they were 3, we're going to talk in a minute about the Obama administration's new program, but if they've come here when they were 3, their parents could have gotten them in. Like some of my clients, their parents are United States citizens and their kids are. I have no idea what that immigration lawyer did by not telling them that you can grandfather in your children if they're not over 16. So you have a 19-year-old who's got an issue. And, like I had a kid that, he was 19, he had a gram of cocaine, he went down on, and this is before some of the immigration law changed a bit that would have been helpful at the time. He ended up in INS custody over a misdemeanor because it was the wrong kind of misdemeanor because it was transportation of a gram of cocaine. It was considered drug trafficking. And he's 19, and his parents are United States citizens, and he's not. And now he's in INS custody, which is now Homeland Security, but that was before they changed the name. Terrible. But you want to find out all these things. Now, there's 2 kinds of non-citizens. There's the undocumented non-citizen, and they're sometimes called illegal aliens, but I don't like that word. Vocabulary is everything. And then there's a lawful permanent resident. Those are the green card people. Okay, there's a little different consequence sometimes depending on which you are, but generally, if there's an immigration consequence, it's going to be to any non-citizen. So don't get hung up on that. Green card does not save them. Aggravated felonies. These are your enemies. You do not want to plead your client to an aggravated felony. Again, there are some misdemeanors, but they're not drug-related. I'm trying to stay on script here. That if you spend time in custody, 365 days, it elevates it to an aggravated felony. And some jails cooperate with the feds, and they'll report him. They'll say, hey, I got a guy in here. He's not a citizen. He just served 365. Before we release him, you want to come get him? So avoid it. Possession for sale of any drug, aggravated felony. Cultivation of marijuana, aggravated felony. So all those folks in California, my clients who cultivate a ton of medicine, if they are a non-citizen, aggravated felony, even if it's a small amount. Conspiracy and attempt, if they're included in the offense of these other offenses, also aggravated felony. And, but when it says must relate to Federal Controlled Substance Act, well, that doesn't exclude very many drugs. All right, I say avoid, of course you're going to. Conviction results in certain removal. That means, and they're permanently inadmissible into the state. They have if they're in the middle of trying to get their citizenship, gone, vacated, canceled. They're not released on immigration bond. And there are exceptions, but they're only if somebody screws up on the federal side. Sometimes they have to bond you out if you haven't done I don't know, there's all these rules I'm not familiar with, but my immigration lawyers are. Again, you've got to have a friend in your pocket who's an immigration lawyer. And they have enhanced penalties for illegal reentry. By the way, most of my clients that I've had that get deported, which hasn't been many, but some of them you can't save. I mean, there's no way. When they always come back. Well, if they come back, they're going to be, if they get caught, they could face federal charges and end up in federal custody for a long time just for coming back in. All right. I say invoke the prosecutor's collateral consequence policy if one exists. That's one. There's a whole bunch of things that you need to gather to figure out how are you going to prevent this from happening. Now, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes these prosecutors are amenable to flattery, like you're working on the same team, that they can be your co-hero, that, you know, and also remember, or I don't know about where y'all practice, but in California, we have a lot of prosecutors that are married to women who have families or some of their members aren't citizens. So if you can find out, if you know your prosecutors, I mean, in LA we have like 800. I don't know 800 prosecutors. But if you can know whether or not they have family members on the in-law side that aren't citizens or that have trouble with this, they may be more compassionate and humanitarian. You know, embrace that, bring them in, bring them into the fold. I already talked about the death squads in El Salvador. That's a huge problem. Now, this is what I did for a client, but this was when I went out to reverse his conviction. It was my very first writ of habeas corpus based on IAC. By the way, not an easy thing to do. Very hard to undo a conviction when you allege illegal or ineffective assistance of counsel. But he was going to be deported to El Salvador. He was one of these guys brought over when he was 3, doesn't speak the language, on and on and on. Okay. I went and but I'm crazy, you don't have to be this crazy. I found, I started calling around and I found an El Salvador community and support people. And they had in their possession a whole State Department review of the death squads in their country, which I got a copy of, and declarations in Spanish that had been translated into English that talked about the death squads from the local law enforcement of El Salvador town or wherever, where my client was going. I created, in my writ, I had all these exhibits of all these official documents. I got them official with that. If they aren't official from an official, like, government agency, you can get an affidavit. This works in California. I don't know the state you work, whether the state you practice in allows you to affidavit to authenticate the document that you have. But I mean, I just went to the ends of the earth to show he is facing potential death. Okay, death for a little drug charge. But his lawyer was now a judge in a courthouse that I had to go to for the first try at the writ of habeas corpus. You can go straight to the California Supreme, or you can go up the chain. And by the way, you're not appealing at every level, but that's beside the point. I went to the Court of Appeal. It was my very first IAC. It was my very first writ of habeas corpus. And I'd call all these lawyers like, I've never done this before. I went to the law library. There's only this one little document on a traversal. What the heck is that? And they go, oh, it's a quasi-civil document. You have to allege, object, and deny everything in the prosecutor's moving papers against your writ. I'm like, WTF. All right, but I had to create it. I had to create that document. But anyway, I go to the Court of Appeal. Now listen to this. They deny me because the moving papers that the Attorney General, by the way, when you start doing writs, it's the Attorney General of the state. They're my opposing opponent. They're my opponent. So anyway, they wrote a moving paper where they made a material misrepresentation. That's my favorite thing to say to judges. Your Honor, the prosecutor made a material misrepresentation. Rather than, he's a fucking liar, all right? He made a material misrepresentation, all right? So this Attorney General replied with a material misrepresentation, which made me, like, at home, go crazy, mad. Okay, in court, I have a quiet voice to bring them to me. Quiet voices bring them to you. Anyway, but I'm not in court. I'm just, you know, filing paperwork. So I have 10 days to respond to his reply with the lie in it. I'm racing to get that done because, you know, how many of you can just go to your office, oh, I got a reply, oh, I'll sit down now and I'll think of my, no, I'm like got a crazy schedule. All right, I got to get this response in. I got the response in 2 days before the deadline. They had already denied it. They denied me a statutory right to respond. I call the Court of Appeals clerk up and I go, what the heck is going on in the 6th Division? I mean, I just called the clerk. I said, that was wrong. I want you to go back and talk to those 3 guys and say, why didn't you give defense counsel time to respond? Because that reply had a material misrepresentation in it. He put me on hold. He said, call me back in an hour. Now, this is what's weird, you guys. There's some databases out there we don't know anything about. He only had my private line. I'm at my office. Within 40 minutes, they're calling me on my cell phone that is not published anywhere, except my clients have it, but they don't know my clients. And he said, they are recommending, no, he said, you never heard this from me, but if you file a reconsideration with your response, and you give us your exhibits, your initial writ of habeas, the reply, and then, give the reasons why you want it to be reconsidered and respond. So I had to file a whole new document, right? Start from scratch because we never told you that. Just go ahead and do that. I did because I'm like, all right, you're not stopping this train. All right, so I file it. And by the way, all the lawyers that have done writ works, it's my very first one, right? They said, you're never going to get it granted. You will never get a hearing. Only 1% of all the lawyers in California have ever had a Court of Appeal grant a writ of habeas corpus based on IAC. Now let me just tell you one more thing about IAC. The burden of proof is actual prejudice, folks. That's above beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to show your client was actually prejudiced. Well, it's kind of easy when they're sitting in INS custody, right? And they might face that death squad, right? Actual prejudice. So what was wonderful is they set a hearing. And I called all these lawyers back, oh, they're giving me a hearing, they're giving me a hearing. And they're like, chill out. That's just bullshit. They're giving you a hearing because then they can deny it and go, you did a real good job, but we're denying it. I'm like, yeah, that sounds something I'm kind of familiar with. But I thought, well, I'm gonna have a positive attitude. I'm gonna go in there. You have to reserve how much time? I said 10 minutes. And by the way, I stuck to it. It was 10 minutes. But I knew I was winning because all of a sudden these 3 guys that hadn't even given me my right to respond, they're saying to the Attorney General, are you actually going to stand there and tell us her client was served well by the defense attorney, that he did not commit IAC? Now I'm standing there and I'm like, oh my God. These 3 guys are basically saying, are you going to have the nerve to say this guy didn't commit IAC? Oh, wow. I walked out there, I knew I'd won because that does not happen. And I did. But so what about me? It was my client. Remember, it's not about us. It was a hell of a lot of work, though. All right. 5 minutes. Oh, we have 5 minutes? Okay. All right, here we go, warriors. All right, strategies to avoid plead client to alternative felony that is not an aggravated felony, if you can get it. You have to try to avoid any admission of guilt, people, of factual basis that will reveal the conduct that is aggravated felony conduct, because sometimes in immigration court they can go behind the plea and they can go to the transcript and then find that, oh, but the conduct was a aggravated conduct, and then they'll try to deport the client anyway. Slow plea, you put it into the future. You guys have this, if you really want a bigger conversation about it, because I have 5 minutes. Gosh, this time's gone fast. Good for all of us, right? All right. There's a pit behind there. She's getting ready to be scooped out. It looks like a big cannabis smoke thing, so that's why I put this slide up there. Let's see. Yeah, well, there's all kinds of incentives. You can waive back time and give them more jail time to try to satisfy the prosecutor's desire for red meat. You can agree to pay a higher fine. You can agree to all kinds of things to get the deal that you need. All right, that's what you're trying to avoid. Okay, there's more strategies here. Okay, happy family. Let's see. There's, I do little, sometimes I put little albums together about my client's life, with little exhibit pads, and I put their little photograph of them when they were a kid. I mean, I do, crazy stuff, like little albums and stuff to give the prosecutor to warm their cold stone heart. And also I give one to the judge, just in case. Okay, Deferred Action Status Program is that Obama administration. It's a new program. and it says certain undocumented persons who enter the U.S. as children would not be deported, but I want you to read through that because I'm really running short of time, and it's all there for you. It talks about how they have to be under 30 years old. Here's important informational, folks. Read through that yourself, because honestly, you're never going to remember really what I say about that anyway, and you're going to have to refer back to it. See if your client qualifies for this, because you still, even if you have a duty to avoid other consequences, like it isn't an aggravated felony, it's not an aggravated felony situation, it's a certain drug convictions will cause them not to be able to stay here and get a work permit, okay? So be careful, it goes through there. I'm going to just flip through it real quick. It tells you everything about it. Slow plea. Here's 2 Supreme Court cases you need to know about. Moncrief versus Holder. And it says that if you are giving away marijuana and it's a small amount, giving away without money, it's not an aggravated felony. Okay, that's kind of good to know. This is about 3 joints being given away to patients, and they went through a hell of a ride here to stay in this country. All right, so it talks about Moncrief versus Holder, and then this is Cara Curry Rosado versus Holder. And this was about how he had 2 simple possessions, and then they tried to, and his possessions were just such nonsense. I mean, I don't even know how you can go down on this kind of stuff, but it was a small amount of marijuana and then 1 anti-anxiety pill that wasn't prescribed, and he was facing deportation. And what it held was that a minor drug possession offense under 2 ounces of marijuana is not automatic grounds for deportation of it says legal immigrant, meaning someone who's here in this country legally. The court also held that a second or subsequent simple possession of a controlled substance does not constitute an aggravated felony unless charged as a recidivism offense, which means they've screwed up so much, we're going to slam it to them because they keep coming back. Okay, now it goes on a little bit more, that case, but you can see it. That's what we're trying to do. We're the person with the sword getting ready to crack down on that Persian prince, that, you know, entitled guy that, well, not the Persian part, because actually that could be our immigration client, but our entitled, you know, full of themselves prosecutors. There we are, we're going to kill them, but figuratively speaking. All right, there you are, the warrior. You have won that war. You are noblemen. You are the one who protects our clients. We are the only one between the government. We are standing between our client and the government. We are the last stop, and we are the person that they look to save them from dire consequences, and it isn't just immigration. The criminal justice system is corrupt, you all know it, and we have to be clever enough to make sure we prevail for our clients, not us, our clients. And then here's, girls, here's us. We're fairy princesses, okay? We want to. All right. Have a great day.